Hello, and welcome to Evolve. I am your host, Jamil Khoury, Arabic pronunciation Jamil Khoury, founder and director of Polycultural Institute, the think and create tank of Chicago's Silk Road Cultural Center. Today's episode of Evolve marks part 5 of our Rebuilding Syria collection. It is titled Al Sharaa and Company Must Go. It is being taped on August 1st, 2025, and will be released on August 16th. I mention these dates as Syria's news cycles are unfolding rapidly. We're at risk of serious whiplash, and a lot can change over the next 2 weeks. Syria's interim president, Ahmad Al Sharaa, may have been overthrown. He may have fled Syria. He may be in Turkey. He may be dead. Or he may be settling in for a 40-year reign as Syria's next entrenched dictator/inveterate despot. God only knows. Whatever the case, may this content be valuable, relevant, and instructive. In the previous Rebuilding Syria episode titled The New Guy in Charge, we explored Al Sharaa's past as an ISIS and Al-Qaeda alumnus, and the popular idea that he's a reforming, recovering, rehabilitating terrorist en route to becoming a pragmatic and responsible statesman. Essentially, he moved beyond youthful extremism and car bombings and embraced realpolitik, a state-centered realism that transcends ideology. Tragically, the sectarian violence of the past months has entirely debunked these claims. I also cited a 2014 interview in which Al Sharaa stated that the Syria he envisioned would be an Islamic state governed by Sharia law with no place for Shia, which includes Alawites, Ismailis, and Twelver Shia, as well as Christians and Druze. In other words, a Muslim supremacist, Sunni supremacist, theocratic fundamentalist state in which religious and ethnic cleansing prevails, hundreds of thousands are tortured and killed, millions are uprooted and expelled, women are at best property, Sunni Muslim dissidents and non-compliers are ruthlessly oppressed, and Syria's history and heritage are desecrated and erased. Basically, everything the Assad regime warned would happen, Al Sharaa had already spelled out for us. Turns out the Assads were not simply stoking irrational fears. And no, Syrians are not pining for the return of those evil monsters. Still, despite all my misgivings and trepidation, I was willing to give Al Sharaa a modicum of the benefit of the doubt. Clearly, my American optimism was in overdrive. I wanted to believe that Syria's interim president was, to put it bluntly, post-genocidal. I was wrong. After mid-July's horrific massacres of Druze communities in Sweida in southern Syria, I am convinced that Ahmad Al Sharaa and his Islamist regime must go. Despite all my caveats and qualifiers in Part 4, I can now state without hesitation that Syria's unelected president is a dyed-in-the-wool, unrepentant, unreconstructed jihadist terrorist, an existential threat to Syria and the entire region. No doubt Al Sharaa talks a good game. He dresses the part, he's well-groomed, And he's very adept at deceiving Western audiences, which sadly requires little effort these days. One big choreographed facade. On camera, he extols the virtues of an inclusive and democratic Syria, in which all religions and ethnicities are equal. Off camera, he orders his militias to wage murderous attacks against the Syrian people and the fabric of Syrian society. We've seen this movie before. It doesn't end well. When Al Sharaa refers to our people, he's talking about his fellow extremists. He's not talking about Syrians. Remember, this isn't about a Sunni Muslim majority pitted against so-called minorities, as many would have you believe. This isn't about most Syrian Sunnis. It's about a radical Islamist ideology hell-bent on destroying Syria as we know it. It is an ideology that annihilates everyone. And to reiterate from part 3, Syria has communities, not minorities. In the Syrian context, we must reject the use of the word minorities. It is deliberately used to diminish and dismiss everyone who isn't a Sunni Muslim. It obscures and denies the diversity within the Sunni population and the uniqueness and integrity of each component of Syrian society. Minoritization can be lethal. When you hear, "Oh, but they're such a small, insignificant minority," what you're really being told is, no one will miss them after we kill them all. Not true. We will miss them. Al Sharaa came to power in December last year. Since then, we've seen the March massacres of mostly Alawite civilians in the coastal provinces of Lattakia and Tartus, the April killings of Druze civilians and security personnel in the southeast suburbs of Damascus, and the July slaughters of mostly Druze civilians in southern Syria's Sweida province. Christians were also targeted and killed in these regime-coordinated attacks. The images and footage we have seen from Syria's coast and from Sweida and from the suburbs of Damascus are blood-curdling. They are gruesome, they are barbaric, and they are forever etched in Syria's collective memory, not for the faint of heart. Entire families have been wiped out. There are family lineages that no longer exist. Parents and children are being murdered in front of each other. Alawites, Druze, and Christians are being hunted, maimed, and slain like wild prey. Critical case in point, a Druze-run hospital was overrun by regime-aligned forces. Patients, doctors, nurses, and visitors were mercilessly butchered. Apparently, that is what Al Sharaa means when he speaks of restoring calm. The Takfiri regime loves to claim they are not responsible for these sectarian pogroms, that the perpetrators operate outside their control. They are lying. There is abundant evidence that points directly at Syria's new rulers. Calculated persecution is being greenlighted and executed by Al Sharaa and his loyalists. They bear full responsibility for this ongoing horror show. To date, over 4,000 Syrians have been killed, and thousands more have been injured, kidnapped, and displaced. Instead of moving to unify Syria, as they've repeatedly promised, Al Sharaa and company have opted to perpetrate genocide against Syrian communities they routinely refer to as pigs, dogs, and heretics. Instead of promoting national healing, they chose a house-to-house killing spree that they were all too happy to capture on film. Be under no illusion, the project of creating an exclusively Sunni Muslim Syria is well underway. It must be stopped. The litany of atrocities committed by Syria's self-declared new masters defies all semblances of humanity. They are competing with the Assads. Allow me to provide a few more examples. A 25-year-old Alawite man had his heart cut out of his chest. The terrorists placed his heart on top of his body, and his family was taunted and mauled as they retrieved their son's remains. Towns, villages, and neighborhoods have been bombarded with mortar shells, blitzed with armed drones, and strafed with high-velocity gunfire. Houses, farms, and businesses have been looted and burned. In fact, Alawite, Druze, and Christian homes are routinely confiscated to house jihadists and their families, resulting in an even worse Syrian refugee crisis. There is footage of regime-aligned assassins forcing Alawites to crawl on their stomachs and bark like dogs before killing them execution-style. Videos have also emerged of Islamists shaving off the mustaches of Druze men, including Druze clergymen and the elderly. In Druze tradition, the mustache is a signifier of a man's honor. This is reminiscent of the Nazis shaving the beards of Orthodox Jews. Al Sharaa's henchmen spray paint people's houses with threatening and hateful messages. One such message read, "You were a minority, and now you're a rarity." In today's Syria, there is an orchestrated campaign of harassment, name-calling, and intimidation in the hope that people will flee. If your policy is to hurl verbal invective, threats, and sectarian epithets against vulnerable, typically poor populations, you are not trying to inspire confidence and trust in your government. Another strategy of Al Sharaa's war on the Syrian people is gender-based violence, abducting Alawite and Druze women and girls into sexual slavery. Dozens of women and girls have disappeared. In the coastal provinces alone, over 60 Alawite females are unaccounted for. Imagine the immense suffering they and their loved ones are enduring. Women who've been rescued or managed to escape testified to being raped, beaten, humiliated, and tortured by their captors, and in some cases, impregnated. Jihadists actually believe they have a God-given right to serially rape women from communities deemed apostates. How can anyone coexist with such an ideology? Where are the Arab, Muslim, and Western feminists when it comes to Alawite and Druze women and girls, and the Yazidi women and girls before them? The list of targets has no end. During the July onslaught in Sweida province, the much-beloved St. Michael Melkite Catholic Church was burned and looted. Icons, liturgical vessels, and prayer books were vandalized and defaced. The church interior was entirely charred. 38 Christian families are now homeless because their homes were torched by Islamists. Why? Because they're Christians. Those Christian families are now huddling in another church building that is also under threat. What is so incredibly sad is that after all the death and destruction in Syria, the unimaginable levels of suffering and loss, a criminal terrorist regime has been replaced by a criminal terrorist regime. The Syrian people do not deserve this. They deserve dignity, they deserve security, and they deserve freedom. And by the way, why are there Syrian army soldiers wearing ISIS badges on their uniforms? And why are we calling death squads, rape gangs, criminal cartels, and religious sociopaths a state army? The violence is not limited to specific regions of Syria. Regime-adjacent terrorism has also struck the city of Damascus. On June 22nd, a homicide bomber and his armed accomplices attacked the Saint Elias Orthodox Church in the Dwayla neighborhood of Damascus. Dwayla is a tight-knit, working-class, mixed Christian-Muslim community known for its strong interreligious bonds. The attack occurred during an evening prayer service attended by over 250 faithful worshipers. Approximately 30 people were killed and over 60 were injured. Many remain in serious condition. The terrorists burst into the sanctuary, firing shots and shouting anti-Christian epithets. A group of brave parishioners immediately charged the terrorists in an attempt to take them down. The main perpetrator then detonated the explosive vest he was wearing, carrying out a premeditated homicide bombing. Bodies were literally blown apart. Shrapnel and debris pierced into people's flesh. Blood was splattered all over the walls and floor, and the interior of the church was largely destroyed. The Saint Elias Orthodox Church massacre was the single worst incident of anti-Christian violence in Damascus since 1860. We in the Syrian Christian world are shocked, devastated, and heartbroken. Our profound trauma and sadness has catalyzed a new political consciousness around our very survival and continuity in Syria. Pray for the martyrs and their loved ones. May their memories be eternal. The identities of the terrorists have still not been released. What is Al Sharaa hiding? It is unclear if they were aligned with Syria's new regime or quote-unquote rival factions. Whether Al Sharaa knew of the attack beforehand or was caught off guard is also unknown. But it is now speculated that the culprits may have belonged to Al Sharaa's General Security Services. Al Sharaa's spokesmen were quick to blame ISIS for the atrocity, with no apparent evidence. Uncharacteristically, ISIS has remained silent. A shadowy terrorist organization called Saraya Ansar al-Sunnah has claimed responsibility, but no action has been taken against them. The lives of Christians are low priority for Syria's new dictatorship. We do know that the perpetrators were motivated by the Islamist ideology that now occupies Syria. By their own words, militant Islamists hate Christianity, they hate Christians, they hate Christ, and they hate the cross. The slaughter at the Saint Elias Orthodox Church lives as a brazen, blood-soaked testimony to their hatred. Yes, Al Sharaa condemned the carnage and promised an investigation. Gee, we've heard that before. He referred to the bloodbath as a criminal bombing, not a terrorist attack, which is notable given his own history of committing terrorist attacks against religious communities. Now, Is he mounting a plausible deniability campaign for his regime, just like he's doing with the Alawite and Druze mass killings? It certainly seems that way. Following the attack, Al Sharaa released a statement that was tepid at best. Many Christians received it as hurtfully insensitive. He spoke of the attack in vague terms, as an attack on Syria, not as an ideologically inspired assault on an integral faith community. He did not once mention Saint Elias Orthodox Church. The words Christian and church did not appear in the statement, and those who were martyred were not referred to as martyrs. In Al Sharaa's worldview, only Sunni Muslims can be martyrs for their faith, no one else. And there was no call for 3 days of mourning, which is customary. The statement also sounded rather detached, or as a Syrian colleague said to me, Al Sharaa's reaction read as if he were expressing sympathy for something that occurred in a distant country, not in his own. Very telling. There is a problem when the president of Syria can utter the words Islam, Muslim, and mosque, but not the words Christianity, Christian, and church. When you cannot name the communities that comprise the country you lead, other than your own community, then you are not the president of all Syrians. A government is only legitimate if it represents the people. These guys do not. To date, Al Sharaa has not visited the Saint Elias Orthodox Church, nor has he mourned with its devastated community, despite repeated calls from church leaders that he do so. Why can't Ahmad Al Sharaa demonstrate public solidarity with Syria's traumatized and beleaguered Christians? The answer may be too painful to bear. Even if we can assume a modicum of sincerity, the official response to the massacre at Saint Elias was grossly inadequate, entirely unacceptable, and woefully out of touch. But it did serve the political function of signaling the regime's attitude towards Syria's Christians. Message received. Time and again, Al Sharaa has proven to be the wrong president to address Syria's fragmented society. Every assault by jihadists is dismissed as an isolated incident and not part of an intentional strategy to purify Syria of those deemed heretics and infidels. It has been reported that many Islamists in Syria and beyond gleefully celebrated the Saint Elias calamity. How sickening and repugnant is that? Please understand, Al Sharaa's ideological ilk is incapable of relating to non-Sunni Muslims as full human beings. They view them as enemies, not as Syrians. Which raises the question, if Al Sharaa spoke about the quote-unquote enemies with love, empathy, and compassion, would he alienate his base, or at least a significant portion of his base? Is it too great a political risk to acknowledge the humanity of your own countrymen? The fact that I need to pose these questions speaks to the depravity and treachery of this movement, a disqualifier from leadership if ever there was one. On an infinitely more hopeful note, despite Al Sharaa's coded and callous statement, lines of Syrians immediately formed to donate blood to the hospitalized survivors of the church attack. Many of the blood donors were Muslims. Some of them were women in hijab and niqab. They responded to a call to save people's lives. Those are images of the Syria that I know and love. That is the Syria worth fighting for. Islamism insults and betrays the beautiful legacies of Muslim-Christian friendship, cooperation, and love that represent the best of our communities. How about we revive those legacies instead of working to bury them? Today, Syria's Alawite, Druze, and Christian communities are reeling with fear. And Syria's Kurds and Ismailis are watching events unfold with tremendous anxiety, wondering if they're next. Syrians are not being protected by the country's new regime. They're feeling unsafe, unwanted, and unwelcome in their own country, as if strangers in their own land. Most horrifyingly, they're being systematically wiped out. Look, I believe Syria should have a Sunni Muslim president. At this time in Syria's history, Syria needs a Sunni Muslim president, not an Al-Qaeda ISIS president. There is no shortage of leadership and talent waiting in the wings. Be that person Arab, Kurdish, Turkmen, or Circassian. How about a Sunni Muslim technocrat committed to pluralism and state building who actually loves Syria, assuming the role? Sunnis are the largest community in Syria, and while no community escaped the wrath of the 54-year Assad family autocracy, Sunnis bore the brunt of the suffering. Yes, many Sunnis were part of the Assad regime. The regime would not have survived without Sunni support. There were Sunnis who benefited handsomely from Assad's corruption, but they also endured the greatest losses and the worst brutality. It does bear mentioning that I am no stranger to politicized and distorted religiosity. I have been a Christian my entire life. I love being a Christian. And for as long as I can remember, here in the U.S., I have been fighting people who call themselves Christians as they inflict very real harm on people they fear and despise. I know this phenomenon exceedingly well. I'm a gay man married to a man, and I will not cede Christianity to those who do us harm. In their warped theological worldview, violence and scapegoating are somehow synonymous with the teachings of Christ. They conflate hatred with salvation, which is blasphemy. Among the reasons I am attuned to the dire threats posed by Islamism is because I'm painfully aware of the triumphalist and dominionist strains within American Christianity, commonly referred to as Christian nationalism. These are belief systems that glorify war and militarism and sanctify the unleashing of state power against perceived enemies near and far, not at all what Jesus would do. Yet people fall for camouflage. The rapidity with which governments around the world have embraced Al Shara's regime is almost unprecedented. Within months, Al Sharaa has garnered extraordinary support in key regional and global capitals, including America's White House. I never thought I'd live to see the day when the Al-Qaeda guy would be America's guy, at least not in such blatant form. Perhaps these world leaders believe he is Syria's best hope for moving forward. Forward to what, I would ask? Unless firm conditions, guardrails, red lines, and accountability measures are implemented quickly, support for the Al Sharaa regime will be tantamount to support for the ethnic and religious cleansing of ancient indigenous peoples. It will signify complicity in crimes against humanity. It will mean alignment with the destruction of Syrian society. To support the Syrian people is to withdraw support for Al Sharaa. An Al-Qaeda ISIS country in the heart of West Asia is a recipe for apocalyptic ruin, both regionally and globally. It will not be contained. Foolish are those who think it will. Al Sharaa and company must go. In no universe can they be Syria's destiny. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Evolve. To learn more about Silk Road Cultural Center and Polycultural Institute, and to support us with a donation, please visit us at silkroadculturalcenter.org. If you appreciated this content and want to help us expand our reach, please like, share, and subscribe. We all have a role to play in rebuilding Syria. Until next time, thank you for tuning in. May God bless and protect you.